Thank you all, and great thanks to Pete Coors. In preparation for being here with you this noon, I read through the website of both the Coors Foundation and Castle Rock. And when I think that there could be people approaching your state houses who want to control his free decision-making for how he spends his money, when the decisions he's made looks like Mother Teresa is on his board, I get concerned. And so when he invited me to be here with you today, I accepted. Let me begin by congratulating all of you as members of ALEC for the work you're doing for America. And then, after that great thank you, let me tell you that although the bulk of your work, I understand, focuses on economic issues and not so much on social issues, let me tell you that philanthropy in America lies right in between those two great areas of concern, the economy and our society. So philanthropy is on your agenda, and it will become more important in your state houses in the months and years to come. A third thing I have to tell you, as the daughter of a P-51 pilot, I begin there because P-51 pilots during the Second World War didn't have gunners and they didn't have navigators. So I was raised by a fellow who decided that each of his 6 children ought to be able to pick the direction, make sure they stayed on course, when they got there, do what they're supposed to do, and navigate home. Single-engine plane, one pilot who was pilot, navigator, and gunner over Tokyo at the end of the war. Taken prisoner, made it back, and made 6 babies who are serving the country. I begin there because this is the country that you and I are responsible for. And we tend, despite all of the telecommunications we have access to, we have so much coming at us that we have to winnow away and just toss stuff. And it's easy to let your world get narrower and narrower to the things that you actually make decisions on. And that's how we will fail in our generation to recapitalize this country. When the greatest generation came back from their very complex assignments of pilot, gunner, and navigator, they went to graduate schools in engineering and in a whole range of fields, and they put themselves to the task all through the 50s of building the economy that you and I are benefiting from, building the society that has brought more justice and opportunity to a greater proportion of our citizens than any country that the world has ever seen. That country is our responsibility, and we can't decide that we're going to take the luxury of just being the pilot, or just being the gunner, or just being the navigator. You and I have to accept a broader range of responsibilities. So I speak to you, members of ALEC, today, and ask you to think about a history and a life in the present for that history that is a critical part of your responsibility. So here goes. America won the trifecta among all God's nations. We won the trifecta, which means we won because we have a democracy, a market economy, and a society framed in philanthropy democracy, market economy, philanthropy. What does that mean? It means that in 1630, a group of people got here in the leadership of John Winthrop, who was, some of you remember from 6th grade, a minister, a true man of God. But the 6th grade teacher didn't tell you he was chairman of the board and president of a company called the Massachusetts Bay Fur and Lumber Trading Corporation that had a charter signed by the king, the version of which was signed by the king. John Winthrop had deleted an important phrase when that copy was made, not by a Xerox machine, but by a scribe. And the line that was taken out was that the board would hold its annual meeting each year in London. John Winthrop had no intention of bringing his board or permitting his children to be educated in London, or ever returning to England, because he had this dream, this idealistic, entrepreneurial dream that he would bring a group of people to this land and build what you heard in the opening prayer referred to as the city on the hill. And so, on his way across with 4 ships and 400 people, all of whom were shareholders, not that they could all afford to be shareholders, mind you, but the ones who were at the executive level knew that they would need farmers and cabinet makers and house builders, and so they offered shares to the people they wanted to come with them to build a community so that together they would build the city on the hill. And you know, they did. But they did because John Winthrop had 2 documents with him on the ship. One, that charter for his company. And the second was a document he wrote that is now called the Sermon on the Arabella. And in a few minutes I'll tell you what I call it. But that document laid out for those 400 people how they would make the city on the hill. And among other important calls, he said in that document, "In this new land we must work as one man, treat each other in brotherly affection, so that those of us with superfluities must be willing to share until all have met their necessities." See the trifecta. Everyone was engaged. Everyone had a vote as a shareholder. That was the tiny nascent pieces of democracy. And then it was a company that expected and did make money and send its product back to England, and did extremely well. The economy. And then the call to a kind of culture that Europe had no idea about, and still doesn't have a very good idea about 370 years later. It would be a society where people would engage each other with brotherly affection, and those with superfluities would be willing to share until others had met their necessities, because that would create the greater good. That would create a society in which strength would be emerging from the gifts that God gave to all families, regardless of the level of their financial capability when they started out. What a brilliant idea. That was philanthropy. Democracy, market economy, philanthropy. You can hear where I believe Alex's work is maybe a couple of steps broader than some of you may have thought.